Hi, this is Dan from UFC, and welcome to our weekly podcast that we're going to start doing this week. So we've been asking everybody on Facebook questions or what kind of questions you guys have regarding executive functioning, regarding ADHD, regarding just time management in general. And we've been getting a lot of feedback from you guys, so thank you guys very much. I have here Luis with me. He's our head coach at EFC, and he's going to be answering some of your questions. We're only going to be running through one or two of them at a time and kind of getting your guys' feedback before we move on to the next couple questions. If you do like this video, go ahead and like the video so that we know that it's good. If you don't like it, comment on where we can improve, etc. We are trying to hit some like goals, so let's make this like goal 10 likes. So if you do like it, go ahead and please press like and share it with your friends and families. And if you like what we talk about, subscribe because we'll be coming out with more content. So cool. So this is Luisa. So the first question that we're gonna go over today is how do we use our time effectively, Luis? So what are some tips and what are some insights that you can provide the parents and the kids and the adults out there that are really trying to figure out how to use their time effectively?
Okay. Um, First of all, let's point out that while we talk about executive function, and that is our job, executive functions coach, um, people think usually about things like ADD, ADHD, anxiety disorders, things like that. But there are lots of reasons people's executive functions can be challenged. They can be long-term things like anxiety or ADD, but they can also be short-term things, short-term stress, worry about a particular situation in your life. These things can also cause executive functions problems. And a lot of what we're going to talk about here applies whether or not you have a neurological difference or just a lot of stuff going on in your life. So I think the first thing to understand is there is no one pill that's going to solve everything for everyone. There is no cure for what we need. It doesn't even need to be cured because it's a difference, not a disease. But since there is no one size fits all, I'm going to give you some of the most basic, most fundamental things that almost everyone can do that will help almost everybody. And the first thing to do when you're facing a big task is to have a plan. Make a plan and break this task down into steps. And these steps should be small enough that they can fit into your pattern of working, your pattern of thinking. So whether or not you have a situation where I can go for an hour, but at the end of an hour, I am just totally frazzled, or if it's 15 minutes on and 15 minutes off, then understand that and work to the pattern. We're conditioned by society to say you're going to start a job and you're going to finish a job and they're going to move to the next job. Some of us aren't wired that way. And so we adapt, have a plan, and try your best to stick with the plan. Now, believe it or not, one of the most important aspects of your plan is going to be making sure that it is broken up into pieces that you can work with. Okay. And so what does that mean? Breaks. We call them productive breaks because what you need to know and what you need to do is understand that your brain, when it goes racing off somewhere else, you need to let it go a little bit. So if you work for half an hour and you know that about a half an hour is about all you can do at a stretch, build into your plan a 15-minute break each half hour, 30 minutes on, 15 minutes off. Again, these are not, this is not for everyone. You'll figure out your spacing. Okay. But let's say 30 minutes on, 15 minutes off. 30 minutes you work on this project, and then you take a 15-minute productive break. So what does that productive break means? It means you do something unrelated to the big project. It could be make a sandwich, read a chapter of your favorite book. I'm going to fold a little laundry. There's a lot of things that you can do, but it should take your mind away from the project. Let your brain reset itself a little bit on that project. Let it get back up, charge up the focus, charge up the energy while you're working on something else. And you'll find that you'll sit down and you will have more focus and energy when you return. It does sound counterintuitive. I admit that it sounds counterintuitive to say the best way to focus is to take frequent breaks, but you can't stay 100% all the time. And people who are having executive functions issues, that downward slope is pretty steep. 100% here, an hour later, 50%. You can't make, that's not going to be helpful. But if you take 100% here, get down to 75%, take that break, then maybe you go back to 85, 90%. So that is the most effective way, I think, to make sure that you're using your time effectively, is to build into your plan the breaks, whatever you need in order to stay focused. It's going to seem like you're spending more time, but in the end result should be that you're spending the same amount of time to get the work done, because you're allowing yourself to reset every so often.
Fantastic. So it kind of seems like what you're saying is that in order to use our time effectively, we kind of need to have a little bit more structure in how we approach each project or each quote unquote game plan or whatever, right? And that structure, I think, because a lot of the times I think when I'm not talking to, adults, kids, parents, etc., they always bring up the idea of being more productive and how it's frustrating that either themselves are not productive or their kids are not productive. And a lot of the times, productive is a very subjective term, right? Like, I could be productive in my mindset where, if I write like 10 blogs a day, that's very productive. Whereas for somebody else, it could be like one blog a day. Or for me, it could be like going on a 30-minute jog, but for somebody else, could be going on like a 2-hour jog or something. So productivity is very subjective. And I think what you're also saying is that it's important to be self-aware of what your productivity level is now. Not where it was before, not where it could be, but where it is now, and really adjust your game plan and really adjust that structure that you're setting to where you are now, and eventually working yourself up to where you want to be. Is that kind of what you're saying? Or?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can train your mind to be more focused. And it is like any other form of exercise. You talk about running 30 minutes. Well, maybe the goal is to be able to make a 2-hour run, but you're not going to start with a 2-hour run. You start with that 30-minute run. And as you get better, as you get stronger, then your time, the amount of time you can run, is going to increase. The brain is like that too. The brain can form neural pathways that it gets used to going down. And you can, over time, keep those neural pathways growing and moving forward. It's not easy a lot of the time, because we are talking about the brain, but it is very doable for people who have focus and support. And I want to mention one other thing about using our time effectively. A lot of the deadlines that we have are self-imposed. And when we have self-imposed deadlines, we can stress out about them even more than a work deadline, because it's something we feel we should be doing. And we feel bad about ourselves if we're not doing what we should be doing. It's better to be realistic about how long it's going to take to complete something. As a matter of fact, I always tell my students, be pessimistic about how much time something is going to take. Don't set yourself up for failure. Set yourself up to succeed. Don't set yourself up to a goal that is going to be a super, super long stretch unless you absolutely have to. There are going to be times in your life when you absolutely have to do something, and it's going to be a mess. It's going to be stressful. And it's going to be exhausting. That's for everyone, no matter what your station is, no matter what your job is, no matter what your brain is like. Everyone has that. But much more of our deadlines than we think are self-imposed. And if we can look at those deadlines, be aware of what we're able to do, maybe try to push a little bit, then we can take the stress off. And you take the stress off, that's taking away a source of executive function disruption.
Yeah, and I kind of want to dive into the idea of energy, right? I think that was another question one of the parents posed, is how do we use less energy? Because, one of the things that you mentioned, Luis, early on in this podcast is that a lot of the times with people and kids, adults, etc., that that have EF challenges, they can go from 100% to 50% in a matter of 10 minutes. They can go from 100% to 0% in a matter of 30 minutes. Energy depletion, when it comes to their mind and their executive function, can be depleted really fast. And it's very frustrating. It makes a sense of, what is wrong with me? Why can't I focus for more than 30 minutes without feeling like I just focused for like 5 hours or something like that? So I kind of want to talk a little bit about the brain in relationship to that to help us understand the progression of using a lot of energy to the fact of using very little energy when it comes to doing work. So how our brains work, especially with individuals that struggle with executive functioning challenges, is that executive functioning is primarily controlled by our prefrontal cortex. Our prefrontal cortex is our forehead. We write a lot of blogs about the prefrontal cortex, about executive functioning capacity, etc. You can go ahead and check those out on our website. But essentially, our prefrontal cortex is in charge of making decisions, deductive reasoning, subjective reasoning. It's in charge of emotional control. It's in charge of, gauging progress. It's in charge of a whole bunch of different things, problem solving, critical thinking, etc., that in itself sounds like will take a lot of energy. And the reason why it's so important for us to structure and plan things out in the beginning and not as we go is because if we're able to kind of come up with a good structure, a good game plan in the beginning with good productive breaks in there, we have an expectation of when we're starting and when we're finishing, and we can actually finish if we follow each of these steps. Then what that actually does is it takes the decision making out of the process while you're actually doing it. And that's actually what causes the most stress. That's actually what causes the most anxiety. That's what drains the brain a lot. Oftentimes, let's just talk about students, right? Oftentimes a student will write all night. They'll write all night and they feel like they did a great job, but then mom and dad comes in and be like, hey, how'd your essay go? And then you respond, I wrote like a paragraph, or I wrote 2 paragraphs. And then your mom's like, the essay's due tomorrow or something. And then there's like freaking out, or maybe you realize that, hey, the essay's due tomorrow, I only wrote 2 paragraphs, etc. That's when your executive functions and your prefrontal cortex is going like crazy, because you realize that you may not have gauged progress enough. And that might cause you to shut down, might cause your brain to shut down. And that's kind of the benefit of having this pre-structure planned out in the beginning, so that you know where you need to be at each time point to be on track. So there's no anxiety about, am I on track? There's no anxiety about, am I going to finish on time? So I just want to emphasize that. Yeah.
Let me jump in with something. I want to build on that a little bit, because you mentioned essays specifically. Now, I am a huge advocate of a thorough outlining process, of a really thorough and organized outlining process. Now, here's a couple of reasons that can apply to a lot of different areas of life in a different way. We talk about having a plan, making a map. Now, if I'm going to write an essay and I sit down and I do an outline first, oh my gosh, that's more time. That's however many minutes that's going to take. But I've organized my thoughts. I've put my thoughts in a proper order. I can decide if this makes sense or not. I have that roadmap. Now that enables me to break things down into those manageable pieces. All right. Because I now know that I'm going to need to do an introduction, 3 supporting paragraphs, and a conclusion. So I can decide I will write my introduction now, take that break, come back and do 1 or 2 supporting paragraphs, take that break, another supporting paragraph, maybe take a break, maybe finish. It doesn't have to be a very rigid format, but it gives you that map to work from. Any task that you do, as simple as making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you can break it down into an outline that's going to have you focused on each individual section of the task, and all of a sudden, boom, the whole darn thing is done.
Yeah, I mean that's good. That's good to point out. And I think that one of the other things I do want to point out is because and maybe a lot of parents are watching this, and it's good to understand this component as well. Um, Planning is also one of the critical components of our prefrontal cortex. Is also one of the critical components of executive functioning. Um, and planning is not something that any individual with executive functions, challenges, differences, etc., um, enjoys doing or is good at doing per se. And it may be easy for us on the sidelines to say, hey, just do this, do this, do this, plan it out this way, do this, do put a productive break in there, put a productive break there. You know, you can do it like this. This is your timeline, etc. Um, all that is very easy for us to say in a third person perspective. But when it comes to an individual with an actual executive functioning challenge, sitting down and doing that by themselves, it's very daunting. It's very challenging because just thinking about the process of planning in itself is going to be very frustrating. It's going to be a challenge in itself because of the executive functioning capacity it requires out of the brain that they either have very limited ability to do so or have no ability to do so. And that's kind of one of the critical reasons why individuals with executive functioning challenges require or really need a good support system. May that be from a parent, may that be from a coach, may that be from a mentor, whoever that individual support or whoever the support system of that individual um, is very important because it's important to recognize that it's actually not that easy for them to do the things that we're just spouting out about, and that it actually requires a lot of patience from the person coaching or mentoring or teaching them to do these specific strategies and skills so that they find it useful, they find it helpful. I think one really critically interesting thing is that almost every single executive functioning student, client, adult, etc., that I've worked with always want to know why. Why is this important? Why is this applicable, etc., etc.? Because the idea of implementing a new thing in their life is just like, I don't want to do it unless it's actually going to help. Um, because it's that hard for them. So it's very important to understand the reasons why we're talking about the things that we're talking about, and we're able to actually explain it to the individuals that we're helping when it comes to their EF challenges.
I'd like to add one thing here. One thing that's really critical to remember is that no two people are going to be exactly alike. And you have to have a plan that's going to work for you. And no matter what other people say, except for your EF coach, because they're here to help to guide you on the way, don't think of it as what other people tell you should be doing. It's what can I do? What will I do? I'm going to give you an example. I've got a student who he's a high schooler. He's doing his summer reading. He got 2 books assigned for high school for summer reading, one fiction, one nonfiction. And we talked about it. And I said, go ahead and make your plan. Go ahead and lay out how you're going to do this. And then we'll talk about it and we'll see how it goes. So he does exactly what I asked him to do. And he's reading both books at the same time. He's got a schedule. He's planned out. He needs to do X pages a day here of book number 1 and X pages a day of book number 2. He's got his review days, his review sessions worked out and all of that. Now, for me personally, the idea of trying to read, track, and work on 2 books at once is very daunting. I don't get it. And I told him so, but he's very confident. He's reached a point in the work with me that I feel like to give him that responsibility. I'm watching it. And so far he's doing really, really well. And I'm very happy with the way he's working. He's doing it in a way that I would never consider doing myself, but for him, it's working. And so you need to recognize that in yourself. Whatever works for you, whatever doesn't work for you, it's not a matter of should or should, it's a matter of works or doesn't.
Fantastic. So I think that about wraps it up for this podcast episode regarding the idea of how to use time effectively, and also addressing the issues around energy and why following a structure will also at some point in time help reduce the amount of energy actually needed to complete a task.
In terms of making your structure, the time and energy that you use to do that actually pays for itself in terms of the reduction in overall time and energy.
Yeah. And there's far less stress when you have a good idea of where to go and how to get there and stuff. Fantastic. So if you guys like this podcast episode, please like and subscribe. Share this with your family and friends. Comment down below if you have any more questions. We will be asking and engaging more on Facebook now. So if you guys have more questions, do not hesitate to reach out to us on Facebook, and we'll go ahead and put on the list of questions that we're going to be addressing on a weekly basis. If your questions are all pretty similar to each other, we will be kind of like grouping them together into general topics. And feel free to let us know if you want more details, like if you want more actual visualizations of what we're talking about. Let us know. We'll try to figure out how we can do that for you guys as well. Besides that, thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Talking to you guys next time. Take care.